Okay, so I had heard that there was some controversy for Chris Stuckman's review or non-review of Madam Web, and that he talks more about the process, I guess, of the filmmaking. And since he's a filmmaker now, he doesn't like to give negative reviews. So I just wanted to watch the video, give my thoughts on all that.
So I had to go see it on Valentine's Day, and I thought to myself, probably not going to do a video for this one based off of what I've heard, since I do try to keep it mostly about film celebration on this channel. Having seen the film, I'm going to tell you that this is not a movie review of Madam Web. I am not about bashing filmmakers, artists. I know how hard it is to make a movie. I do not know how hard it is to make a movie under the studio system. I was able to make an indie film without a giant corporation breathing down my neck, which is not the privilege that S.J. Clarkson had when she directed Madam Web under Sony, which I can only imagine was monumentally difficult.
I get what he's saying, and I too do know how hard it is to make a movie. Trust me, I know. But I think you can still criticize the film because it is a work of art after all. And you can be constructive about it. You don't have to be an asshole. You don't have to go full on angry video game nerd about it. Like, you can be respectful with your criticism, but I do get what he's saying.
This is not going to be a video about Madam Web and telling you whether or not you should see Madam Web. There are plenty of people on this platform, as well as a website dedicated to aggregating reviews and giving it a number that's going to inform you of that, and you can choose to listen to those voices if you want. The information is out there.
I mean, we kind of already know it's not a good movie.
Am compelled to make a video about is something that I heard pretty much every writer, some directors, and most actors bashing last year, and that is movie studios. But before we go any further, I do want to give a special thank you to the sponsor for this video, BetterHelp. The past few years have been so life-changing for me, becoming a father, dealing with the Hollywood strikes, making my first movie. It has been such a privilege to have something like BetterHelp to turn to.
My man's became a slave to the Matrix.
When I feel like I really need to talk. It's a new year and a great time to work on yourself. BetterHelp makes starting therapy easier and much less intimidating for a lot of people. BetterHelp lets you have therapy sessions as a phone call, as a video chat, or even messaging. Whatever's the most comfortable version of therapy.
I've heard mixed things about BetterHelp.
BetterHelp can match you to one of over 30,000 therapists in their network based on your needs, preferences, and location, which gives you access to a wider range of expertise than may be available in your city. To get started, you fill out a questionnaire that will ask you questions about what challenges you're going through and what kind of therapist you'd like. And then BetterHelp can match you with a therapist to help you. You'll be matched with a therapist in most cases within 48 hours. And you can schedule therapy sessions at a time that's convenient for you. And if you feel like your therapist isn't a great fit, you can switch therapists with a click of a button in your settings at no additional cost. So join over 4 million people who've used BetterHelp to start living a healthier,
10%
happier
off.
life. You can click on the link in the description below. That's betterhelp.com/Chris Stuckman. Clicking on that link helps support this channel, but it also gives you 10% off your first month at BetterHelp so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. Once again, that link is betterhelp.com/Chris Stuckman. Thank you so much to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. In the case of Madam Web, this movie was put out by Sony in association with Marvel, probably not to the level of association that Tom Holland's 3 Spider-Man movies were. This video is inspired by essentially every live-action film that Sony has had some involvement in since Spider-Man 3 in the Spider-Man verse. That being...
Yeah, Sony, their track record with their Marvel movies has not been good. I know Venom did well financially, and I mean, I haven't seen any of them, but I'm sure Venom at least is fun.
In Spider-Man 3.
Which is, people in general don't care if a movie's good or bad. Like, as long as it's fun or entertaining, people will watch the movie.
The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, Morbius, and Madam Web. Since it got pushed back due to the strikes last
Look at those abs.
year, none of us got to see what Sony did with Kraven the Hunter, but we will this year, so I can't really comment on whether or not Sony treated that property with respect. And of course,
They probably didn't.
know that Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man films don't necessarily relate to the Sony Spider-Man universe that they're trying to set up right now, nor do Andrew Garfield's
Spider-Man 2, one of the greatest superhero movies ever made, in my opinion.
movies, but this is not about that. This is about how Sony treats their characters and their properties, and more importantly, how they treat their filmmakers.
They could treat them as quick crash grabs.
And what exactly is going on? Because I have so many questions. When you look at the films I mentioned that Sony has made, there's of course division from people about whether or not all of them are bad or good, and
They're bad. They're bad.
some people like more than others. There's plenty of people who like the first Venom movie, but I think there are more people who are a little disappointed by it, and especially the Let There Be Carnage sequel. But plenty of people enjoy Spider-Man 3 well enough. I'm one of them.
Spider-Man 3 is nowhere near as good as Spider-Man 1 and 2, but it's still fun. And overall, the story's passable. It could have been much better, and Venom does feel very shoehorned in. Yeah, I'm very mixed on Spider-Man 3. It isn't anywhere near as bad as the Sony movies after.
And there's a lot of things in Spider-Man 3 that I have fun with, although it's clearly not as good as 1 or 2. And there are people who enjoyed The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 quite a bit.
Not me. Though after No Way Home, I kind of look back on them fondly. Andrew Garfield kind of was underappreciated as Spider-Man at the time. But I feel like I need to rewatch those movies. Though I do remember Amazing Spider-Man 2 being not great.
But I think that if you were to look at a consensus, the consensus is that the live-action, Sony-based Spider-Man universe movies have not exactly all been home runs. I haven't mentioned the animated Spider-Verse films, both of them being terrific. The way I view the
Yeah, those are... Well, I haven't seen the second one yet, but Into the Spider-Verse, great film.
two Spider-Verse movies is kind of the same way I view The Invisible Man and Split and Get Out and other films that Blumhouse has produced. Because Blumhouse has produced a lot of other movies as well. But those three really do seem like, damn, where'd those come from?
Well, when you're just crapping out movie after movie, I'm sure some of them are bound to be at least good. Because what Blumhouse does is they put out really cheap horror films. And since horror films are super popular, tons of people go to watch them. So you put out a cheap horror film, and tons of people go watch it. They make a lot more money. Like their return on investment is much higher on those kind of films. So even if a film fails, the hit isn't as bad as compared to if a big mega blockbuster fails. So that's the Blumhouse model.
Studios have really good instincts, and they can pick filmmakers and stories across the board that for the most part are going to be at least decent. I look at a studio like A24. Pretty much most of their movies, if you see a trailer for an A24 film...
Well, A24 for the most part is a distributor. Only recently have they begun producing their own films. But before, they'd watch the film, see if it's good or bad, and then buy it. Which I feel is a lot easier than making it.
You can probably bet that it's not going to be terrible.
And even with A24, I think a few of the films they have put out aren't great.
That it's at least going to be decent, and maybe even really good. And I don't feel that way with every single studio. It's like a flip of a coin. You could get one of their best efforts, or you could get another one.
See, but that's the thing with filmmaking in general. Like, you just never know what you're going to get. Nobody sets out to make a bad movie, yet bad movies exist. Like, it isn't as simple as this, I feel.
And I do think it comes...
Like, even with Chris Stuckman's film, I don't know if it's out yet, and I haven't seen it. But I'm sure he himself didn't set out to make a bad film. And I'm sure he and his crew put in, like, blood, sweat, and tears and so much money into it. But if it comes out bad, it comes out bad. Like, these things just happen sometimes.
It's down to the filmmaker they're working with and whether or not they back off and give that filmmaker the freedom they need to tell a cohesive, coherent story.
Well, I think that depends on the filmmaker as well. Because some filmmakers be wilding out there.
It doesn't mean that every writer is going to be great. Two of the writers of Madam Web worked on another film in the Sony universe that has been heavily criticized called Morbius. But sometimes what I've learned and what I've experienced myself, not on my film, but on scripts that I've optioned to some studios, and it went nowhere, is that when people have power over you as a creative, when they're paying your bills and they're paying you well, they can tell you to do anything, and you have to do it, no matter what. It's like that scene in Vampire's Kiss where Nicolas Cage is threatening to fire his secretary, and he says,
"You're the lowest on the totem pole here, Alva. The lowest. Do you realize that?" "That's right, Alva. It's a horrible, horrible job."
Bipolar 1, I got help to push back.
I got help to push back.
I couldn't think of a more horrible job if I wanted to. And you have to do it. You have to, or I'll fire you. Do you understand?
sometimes
Yeah, they're pretty much paid to be yes men at that level and in that system that they work at. So what will happen is they'll write a draft. Like Sony will probably be like, we want a Madam Web script. So the writers go off. They probably write something pretty decent for a first draft. Then Sony's like, okay, now make it shitty. And the writers are, yes, sir, absolutely, sir. So they make it shitty, and then, of course, a million revisions happen until we get the final draft, which is horrible. And Sony's all like, oh, now there's a movie we're going to make. Like, that's just how it is. And there's really nothing the writers can do about it.
that's exactly what it feels like when you're a creative dealing with a larger entity that has control over your creation, or at least your script or your story or your characters. When they can tell you what to do and you got to do it, it doesn't matter if you think it's insane. You have to find a way to make it work. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened on Madam Web. And
Yeah, wasn't there like a Turkish Airlines thing with Zack Snyder, Justice League, and his thing? Like, do you really think Zack Snyder wrote in his script, oh, let's really give a big shout out to Turkish Airlines in this movie?
Morbius and all these movies, but I would not be surprised, because when I look at Sony's involvement with the Spider-Verse films, I see Lord and Miller that have had massive success on the big screen in the past, that have made a lot of money for a lot of people and have proven themselves to be very smart at what they do. And I can totally see a company like Sony saying, why don't you guys give us your best shot and then we'll give you some notes. Now, for a filmmaker like SJ.
Yeah, well, with that, Sony probably, from what I heard, Sony didn't really care about Into the Spider-Verse. Like, they said, whatever, just make a side animated film. And as a result, Chris Lord and Phil Miller, or those two, they had a lot more freedom than if it was like a live action film. And since those two are talented at what they do, we got a great film. Whereas what happened with Solo is they probably weren't the right fit for that job. And we all know what happened with Solo.
Jay Clarkson, who made Madam Web. She's had a long and respectable career directing television, but she's directing her first movie, and it's a Sony superhero movie. When I saw Madam...
Yeah, directing for television and directing a feature film, it's a completely different world, different skill set, different everything.
Web earlier today, there wasn't a single part of me that thought, wow, this is just a terrible filmmaker. I could not help but see the myriad of evidence that has been laid at all of our feet that this is a studio that is simply retaining the rights to their characters, that does not care about the quality of this experience they're giving us. There's been too many examples of movies that all feel kind of the same, like a mishmashed early 2000s superhero movie. They can't seem to get out of that. No matter how many times we've said to this studio, we would prefer it if you went a different way, even with the excellent examples of their two Spider-Verse films. And I can't help but think, who is this for? Who wins here? Is it the audience? It seems like it isn't, guys. Is it the creatives? Definitely not. Is it the studio? Are they making a lot of money because they keep doing this over and over again? Sometimes it makes sense to make a Venom movie. It makes sense to make a Spider-Man movie. Those are characters that are going to generate money no matter what. Morbius and Madam Web, Kraven the Hunter, remains to be seen. That is not the same level of reward that a studio might receive from producing a Spider-Man or a Venom movie. So why are they making them? Is it to retain the rights? Is it to get some kind of financial break? Potentially. And in that case, they probably don't care that much about each and every one of us who forks over our hard-earned money to sit in a theater on Valentine's Day when they could have been doing anything else. I care so much about the filmmaker experience.
I get what he's saying. I think potentially any film could work if you put in the time and make it good. Like look what Marvel did with Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, who knew who the Guardians of the Galaxy were before that film? Yeah, I think Madam Web and Morbius could have worked, but Sony did not try.
And I am so aware of how crushingly difficult it can be to make a film, but I also care a lot about the audience, and I want people like myself who go to these movies to have a good time and to feel like they invested some of their money into something that gave something back to them, that inspired them in some way, or made them just happy for a couple hours. And Sony...
And that's why I think it's okay to criticize film. Because at the end of the day, it's an artwork that's meant to be paid for, to be seen. So if somebody's going to spend their hard-earned cash to watch your movie, it better be worth it.
And their treatment of these characters seems to be doing the exact opposite. Currently in the industry, it's the Wild West when it comes to spec scripts, especially. From what
Film in general is the Wild West. Be wild and out here.
I understand, a lot of spec scripts are not even being read, very rarely in fact, unless you're a very specific kind of movie or a studio is looking for something so particular that you just so happen to be that perfect thing. From what I understand, lower budget horror...
You don't read your shit. You got to be repped by an agency, and you got to have some like name brand recognition. Like if I just wrote a feature and I just sent it to a bunch of studios and representatives and all that, they'd all throw it in the trash to protect themselves legally and just because they're not interested.
Is still being looked at, especially haunted house things or things that are very marketable. But in general, the industry has no idea what it's doing right now post-strikes. They have no clue.
Post-strikes, but there might be another one in June.
Movies are selling for almost $20 million at festivals from first-time filmmakers. And other movies that seem like they should be selling really big because of the names that are attached aren't. Nobody knows exactly what's happening right now because everyone is so beholden to this algorithm or whatever Netflix is telling them people want to see. This is creating...
I mean, I feel like it's been like that since forever. Like different studios, different distributors are looking for different things. And like I said, a film in general is the Wild West. Like, some great movies do horribly at the box office and some horrible movies do great. Like, you just never know with film.
An almost robotic-like dystopian conveyor belt of movies that we are essentially supposed to kneel at the very end of, open our mouth really wide and just consume, and then ask, when do we get the next conveyor belt thing that you have generated for us from your algorithm robotic AI thing, whatever that is. Because
yeah, but that's another thing. I've heard Netflix has lost so much money from making a ton of films and buying up a ton of films to the point where like now they're cutting back on their production. And as a result, people are working less, from what I've heard, which makes sense. Like, the amount of movies Netflix has released within, like, the past 5-10 years, how many of them have actually, like, been popular or, like, that you've actually seen? Like, only really a handful that I can name off the top of my head.
When I watched Madam Web, there wasn't a single...
Because after Irishman, they dropped off from Martin Scorsese. They were like, nah, we're done.
Part of me that thought a writer sat down and came up with the idea of the final fight happening underneath a giant neon Pepsi Cola sign. I just don't think...
Yeah, they probably wrote it to be Coke. And Sony was like, no, we got brand deals with Pepsi.
Writer sat in their apartment in LA and thought, that's a good idea. I'm pretty sure Sony said, we have to incorporate Pepsi in some way and deal with it. And that's what it's like for a lot of these creatives. I just heard a story today about someone who's working with a massive entity studio, I won't say what it is, who has hired that person to write a story based off of a very interesting hook. He wrote the whole script, came back to them, and they said, you know what, we don't really like that hook anymore, but we still like your story. Can you make it work without the hook? And this poor writer is trying to figure out how in the world they got hired to write a story based off of an idea and are now told to write the exact same story, but without the idea.
It'd be like that. These giant these film studios now are run by giant corporations who don't know what they're doing. So you get dumbass idiot notes like that. Like even on the smaller scale where I work, where I'll edit something to like a song or something. I submit it, they like it, but like, oh, can you change the song? I'm like the whole edit is based around the song. It's not just a simple change.
And that's exactly the type of situation that so many writers find themselves in. And I would not be surprised if a lot of these Sony Spider-Man universe movies have had very similar conversations bouncing around their meetings. It's maddening, and it does good for no one. So what are my solutions for this? It's the same solution I've said for a couple years now, because I've started to make more discussion-based videos about the industry and how we can communicate with them and get better films and start to enjoy the theater-going experience more, and not just hope that a great film like Godzilla -1 comes out of Japan so that we can enjoy that here.
I still need to
It's
watch
the same
that.
thing I've always said. They hear us through our wallets. If a movie comes out that is genuinely great and we happen to see it in the theater, that's fantastic. But then
Yes, people vote with their wallets. So people will go out and buy Venom, and Sony will make more Venoms. And Scorsese will make Silence. Nobody watches Silence, so then nobody wants to make Scorsese movies. It's unfortunate that that's just the way it is. A lot of people just don't want to watch those kind of movies in theaters anymore.
buy it to own on digital or buy the Blu-ray of it. Let them know, like, this is...
But nobody does that anymore either. Like, less and less people are buying Blu-rays now that everything's on Netflix or other streaming services. Like, it's just an unfortunate reality, because the home sales used to like make up for any like theatrical failures.
more like it. And that's what we're getting with Oppenheimer. It's what we're getting with Barbie. When you see a movie where it's like, okay, that creator, Greta Gerwig, took an IP, Barbie, and made a completely original movie out of it, and it became the highest grossing film of the year, and it's nominated for multiple Oscars, even though she totally should have been nominated for director. They hear that. They understand, all right, so...
Yeah, Barbie was a risk that paid off. Like, they could have just as easily made a shitty cash grab Barbie film, but they took that risk. And I feel like Barbie's a unique case, because the message it was saying just appealed to so many women, and women are like half the population of the country and of the world. So as a result, it did huge numbers. Whereas Oppenheimer, I think the Nolan name really is what sold it to a lot of people, because they know, oh, Nolan, good movies. Because if some other director made a movie about Robert Oppenheimer, and from talking to friends and family, they were like, I don't really care about the story of the atom bomb or Oppenheimer, but it's Nolan. Like, he's made some great films. Like, it's the name brand recognition definitely helps.
IP-ish, but original. Got it. And that's okay. Like, there's so many openings for filmmakers to take very original ideas into things. In an ideal, perfect industry, the filmmaker-studio relationship would be more of an understanding, loving relationship. But the problem right
It has never, ever been that.
now is that so many studio executives, people who are making the decisions, did not come from a place of creativity. They were potentially managers or agents or people outside of the creative space in Hollywood who worked their way into a place where they're now telling creatives what to do. That's not the case for all of them, but it is the case for many of them. And they don't have
I mean, so many of them are owned by large multinational corporations now. Same thing with gaming. I think a top Ubisoft guy used to work at like Taco Bell, like management at Taco Bell, like something crazy like that.
ideas. They just have like inklings of what the market might want. What's selling big? What's not selling big? Well, we need to go towards this path because that movie sold really big. People are looking for this. Our Netflix algorithm...
Yeah, I think Mattel now, they're making movies on like their other toy brands, I believe. So we'll see how those go. Probably won't be as good as or successful as Barbie.
is suggesting that we need to make a movie about kung fu pirates who also cook. Like, that's what's happening, and it sounds like a joke, but I'm swear to you, it's not. It's not a joke. So people
He's
have
not
been
lying.
put
It'd
in
be like
positions
that.
of power who want to be creative, but aren't creative. But they're put in a position where they now have to tell creatives what to do. And that's why you're seeing a lot of these things that you're seeing in film lately. And the hopes are that more filmmakers are able to break through with like an indie film. Look at Nolan. He was able to kind of prove himself. He took those steps. You know what I mean? In the case of a lot of these filmmakers who make their first movie as a giant studio film, the studio does not look at that filmmaker as if they are an equal. They look at them as if they're someone they can boss around and tell them what to do because they're paying the bills, and what have you done exactly? And
Yes, and Marvel, I think, does the same thing with their directors. where pretty much everything's already set in stone. Like the writing, the story, everything. And the director really just there to make the day go along smoothly.
That's a lot of what we're seeing now. So pay for movies that are good. Keep paying for movies that are good. That's the only way that we can turn
But then good is subjective. Like nobody went to go watch Silence.
the dial to where it needs to be. Guys, thank you so much, as always, for watching. I really do like making these discussion videos. I do think that as I learn more about the industry, I have a unique position to be able to discuss ways that we can make it better, ways that we can help it, and hopefully, in the end, do what we all want, is to see good movies and have fun watching them and feel inspired. That's what we all want, right? We want to see good movies. So thank you, as always, for watching, guys. Look forward to more videos very soon.
So great video by Chris. I think he is right. He's absolutely right with what he's saying. I think why people are mad at him is because he doesn't want to, I guess, give a bad review to Madam Web. But like, I think he could have still released a constructive criticism review of Madam Web.
I've got another feature presentation video coming out this Sunday. I'm very excited about it. It's definitely not a fun movie, but it is an excellent movie called Grave of the Fireflies.
One of the greatest films ever made.
If you've never seen it, it's a really tough watch, but it's an absolutely monumental achievement that I have been wanting to talk about for many years.
Maybe I should watch that and give my thoughts.
Thank you so much. As always, look forward to more videos very soon. And if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.
Again, great video. He's absolutely right. And I think he should have released, this video was right to make, but probably also should have released a review of Madam Web. Because I haven't seen it, but I already know it's probably awful. Like, I've seen the memes, I've heard what friends have said. But that's not on the director. That's on Sony. That's on the writers that they pushed around. And I don't think releasing a constructive review is bad-mouthing or shit-talking. Like, as long as you're respectful about it. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Chris Stuckmann's video. And I'll see you next time.